But yeah, I've been watching Game of Thrones, and my goodness, what a depressing show. If you like watching murder and savagery and rape and incest and just slaughter, that's the show for you, Game of Thrones. And I could not help but wonder, I actually looked this up last night to see, because, you know, it's based on a bunch of monarchies looking to take over the throne. And I'm like, this has to be based on at least some historical precedents. And it turns out that it's largely based on a variety of historical events throughout the history of England, namely the War of Roses and other events throughout England's history of people just fighting over thrones, over disputes of who claims the throne. Talk to this broad first. These rodents are digging up my garden. But I could not help but wonder, all this talk about Game of Thrones, like, isn't this the world? And I know it's a fictional world because there's dragons and magic and zombies and stuff in the show. But I couldn't help but wonder, isn't this what conservatives want the world to be like? Because I've been looking at, I know I've talked about this before, but I've seen some pretty telling tweets over the last few days. There's this tweet from Yoram Hazony, who, if you don't know who Yoram Hazony is, he's been on PragerU, he's been on Rubin Report talking about how great nationalism is. Of course, in the PragerU video, he talks about Hitler being a nationalist. He's like, well, Hitler said he was a nationalist, but that wasn't real nationalism. And that's where Candace Owens got that talking point from. Oh, well, Hitler was more of a globalist because he tried to expand beyond Germany, so he wasn't really a nationalist. Of course, Hitler calls himself a socialist. Then it's, oh, look at, Hitler was just another socialism. See how horrible socialism is? Hitler calls himself a nationalist. Oh, well, that wasn't real nationalism. Let's be real here. But Yoram Hazony had a tweet recently. Huh. Only worked on one of them. What do you know? Not doing well with the action command. But Yoram Hazony, he had a tweet saying something like, crapping on Enlightenment philosophers like Hobbes and John Locke and Descartes and a few others, saying that, you know, these people, they didn't have kids, they didn't have families. I think one of them, I think he mentioned Descartes had kids but gave them up for adoption. Basically, Yoram Hazony's point was, these guys don't, you know, these guys had ideas, but they didn't have families, so what do they know? Like, do their ideas apply to families and having kids? Essentially, what do they know? And he even mentioned the Enlightenment. Enlightenment ideas aren't really applicable to family and having kids. Oh my god, this ghost is fired. Alright, I don't want to deal with these guys. I'm gonna do a Starstorm. So Yoram Hazony crapping on the Enlightenment, and then last night, Faith Goldie, said on Twitter that the Enlightenment was like the most blue-pilled, cringeworthy thing to ever happen to Europe. When prior to the Enlightenment, Europe essentially looked like Game of Thrones. That wasn't cringeworthy? There we go. Smack, 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 smack. No, according to Faith Goldie, Europe was just all sunshine and kittens and rainbows and cupcakes and unicorns prior to the Enlightenment, before all this reason made everything so much worse. And then, of course, you have Big Brains Ben Shapiro. He actually said something similar to Yoram Hazony. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. You know, one of his big criticisms of Ayn Rand is that she didn't have any kids, and that her stories don't have any kids. They're not about families. None of the heroes have kids. So what does Ayn Rand know if she doesn't have kids or families? Because apparently ideas only count if you have kids. Like, do we apply this to Isaac Newton? Like, oh, who cares what Isaac Newton said about calculus and gravity? He didn't have any kids. How is that applicable to family values? At least Ben Shapiro is nice enough to pay respect to the Enlightenment. Of course, he waters it down, saying, of course, in his little book that, oh, the Enlightenment was great, but too much reason, too much thinking, and you get the French Revolution. Those reasonable, logical French revolutionaries. That's what you get. It's either that, or if you have too much faith in religion, then you get Saudi Arabia, you get the Spanish Inquisition. So you need a healthy balance of reason and faith. That's what Ben Shapiro tells his audience. You ever notice how sycophantic his audience is getting, though? Oh, Ben Shapiro, facts over feelings, just regurgitates slogans and bumper sticker talking points at them. Doesn't really encourage them to think. Because he's definitely not proposing more reason, more thinking. In fact, he says, hey, go to church. Go to church and embrace God so some philosopher king can tell you what to do and how to live your life. And also pass on to those values to your kids. Bring your kids to church. I think Yoram Hazony also, he talked about this in an essay about Jordan Peterson, about how great Jordan Peterson is because he encourages people to go to church and teach your kids values. But whatever you do, don't think for yourself. Facts over feelings, but don't think too much. Oh wow, I'm out of FP. Every time I say FP, I think of the word FAP. I'm out of FAP. I need more lotion. That wasn't lotion, that was a rock. You can't fap with rocks, you stupid mole. Actually, I'm gonna do a refresh. Ben Shapiro destroys Stewart's YouTube recommendations with clickbait and logic. But yeah, according to Shapiro, the Enlightenment, I mean, it had some good ideas, but it needed to be restrained by faith. Because too much thinking and reason gets you the French Revolution, the reasonable Maximilien Robespierre, and Ministries of Truth, and all that nonsense. Me. Shut up. I got work to do. I'm taking orders from you. Alright. I gotta go back up and take a nap. Anyway, the point of that rant is Game of Thrones is, I've always said that the American right is motivated by pre-Enlightenment ideas, and that the American left is motivated by anti-Enlightenment ideas. And it shows when you look at the... Talk is one of the options. Yeah, I want to talk to this depressing tree. Hey, you want to talk? I'm bored. Get on social media. But you look at how hostile a lot of these right-wing intellectuals and conservative intellectuals and pundits are to the Enlightenment. And you look at what the world in Europe was like before the Enlightenment, it looked like Game of Thrones. So yeah, the Yoram Hazonis and the Faith Goldies and the Ben Shapiros of the world, they want more Game of Thrones. That's what they want America to look like. That's what, one of the bad guys, Tywin Lannister in Game of Thrones, that's what he's motivated by. He's all obsessed over his family legacy and his family bloodline, his family bloodline, and, oh, I gotta do this for the Lannister name. We need to have someone on the throne, and we need to rule it, for the sake of my family name. It's not about happiness or living a good life, although I don't think in that universe, living a good life is really possible or feasible. Kirk, are you familiar with the nauseating academic trend to whitewash the entire Middle Age? Oh yeah, PragerU does that all the time. Again, what more proof do you need that that conservatives want Game of Thrones? There's a whole PragerU video talking about how the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, I think they use the term Dark Ages, the Dark Ages were not so dark. And it's true that there were some achievements made during the time, but it's not a period you'd really want to live in, especially if you had the option of living in America today. A historian who wrote a book about how the Dark Ages really were dark said that the multiculturalist left also whitewashes the Dark Ages now, because if you concede that the Enlightenment wasn't better than medieval customs, then you're likely to concede that modern customs aren't better than hunter-gatherer customs. That wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, because according to the multicultural left, no culture is superior to another culture. So like modern day America, with our electricity and our somewhat respect and admiration for individual rights and private property and technology and well-being, economic well-being and high standard of living, it's basically the same as the Aztecs who practiced human sacrifice and sacrificing people, cutting people open on the tops of pyramids, and I think cannibalism. I think one or both, the Incas and the Aztecs. I don't know if they both practiced cannibalism, but I think one of them did. But yeah, basically the same. I got into that argument after seeing Black Panther. I said it's amazing how Black Panther, they're so like the Wakandans are so technologically advanced and they're so intelligent, yet they have this primitive way of picking a king by just having a battle between the heirs. Like, there's not democracy, there's no constitution, it's just, oh, whoever wins this fight in front of the waterfall gets to be king and rule over Wakanda. Like, they didn't think that part through? And then someone said, well, and then, by the way, keep in mind that this is a fictional thing with Marvel. Like, this isn't like a real story. And the person I was arguing with was like, oh, well, you shouldn't judge other cultures. Who are you to judge other cultures for having a primitive battle for king like that?